piano and just like L.A. It's great. Yes, in L.A. we usually have rock groups doing it. It's interesting, singing Happy Birthday. I was at a birthday party a couple weeks ago with a friend of mine. And we were all sitting around and everybody was singing Happy Birthday, and he was a normie. And at the party, Happy Birthday to him. When it was all over with, I yelled out, "Keep coming back," and there were 30 people turned and went, "What?" Laughter, God, I love the sound of laughter. I was reading many articles on laughter and how it's good for the soul. I remember when I was drinking and using drugs, whenever anybody laughed, I knew that they were laughing at me. Because I was constantly making an ass out of myself, and I was always embarrassing myself. And, now that I'm an Alcoholics Anonymous and I hear a laugh today, it's great, because if I'm making an ass out of myself, so what? That's okay, it brings laughter. And laughter is what's good for the soul. I'm nervous. In fact, I'm petrified. And that's okay. I wanted to think of something really clever to say coming from Los Angeles. I feel that to say something very profound, something that'll move the room. And, the only kind of thing is if you don't drink, you can't get drunk, and that's about the extent of it. It was in my second year of sobriety that I jumped up. I was telling Jim, somebody told me that when I first came and said, "Hey, if you don't drink, you can't get drunk." And I was sharing at an institution, and I said, "If you don't take that first drink, you can't get drunk." And I walked outside, and I stopped, and I said, "Son of a gun, if you don't drink, you can't get drunk." And I finally realized a year and a half later, if I don't take that first drink, I can't get drunk. And I'm very slow. First things first, and here it is, I'm in my fourth year now. Now I know what they mean, first things first. It's interesting when you were reading the preamble, keep the part there, no dues or fees. From that point forward, I heard absolutely nothing. My mind went blank. I started assessing what am I going to say? Should I be should I be profound? Should I be this? Should I be that? And when I heard that there are no dues or fees, what came to my mind is my first AA meeting that I went to. As a matter of fact, I went down to Florida. I have a brother who had a couple of years of Alcoholics Anonymous at the time, and I went down there to go through detox because I didn't want anybody in Los Angeles to know that I had a problem. And I was sitting at the first meeting, and I heard the person who was reading this say, it came up, I heard him say, "There are no Jews or thieves." And I stopped in my tracks. I'm sitting next to my brother, and I looked over at him, one of these, like, to see what his reaction is, and he didn't blink, he didn't move. And I said, evidently, he didn't tell anybody that he was a Jew. And, I had surrendered. I was exposed to Alcoholics Anonymous back in 1957. And it took me 24 years to get my first year. But when I was there and I heard this, I started shaking. And I didn't want to say anything to anybody because it worked for my brother for a couple of years. And I figured if it worked for him, I'm sure it'll work for me. And so I just kept my mouth shut. And the next day I came back and sitting there, and they said there are no dues or thieves. And then the next day I heard that there are no dues or fees. And that's what happened. That's how my mind worked. I would hear things. You would say something, and by the time it came out of your mouth to my ears, it was totally different. Matter of fact, when I left Florida to come back to Los Angeles, I was looking for an AA meeting, and I called up the information. I said, I have the number of Alcoholics Anonymous. And they said, well, I have a number of the Alano Club. And I said, well, no, I want the number of Alcoholics Anonymous. And they gave me this number, and somebody answered the phone, and they said, this is the Alano Club on Washington, out in Marina Del Rey. And what I had heard was this, a conversation with something like this. Hi, my name's Fred. I just came back from Florida. I went to detox down there, and I wanted to know where there's meetings, and they said, do you do drugs? I said, yeah. They said, well, you don't want AA, you want NA. This is strange. So I took the number of NA, and they gave me the number of NA, and I called them, and they said, do you do alcohol? And I said, yeah, well, you don't want NA, you want AA. So I hung up the phone, and I sat there, and I sat there, and I sat there, and I said, AA doesn't want me. NA doesn't want me. And I put together a couple weeks here. I can do this on my own. So I didn't need anybody. I had a copy of the big book, and I knew if I had a problem, all I had to do was just pick up the big book, because everybody said the answers in there. So a couple weeks passed, and I felt good. 3 weeks passed, I felt fantastic. A month or two passed, I felt fantastic. And a friend of ours invited us to his wedding, and he said, Freddie, would you participate? What we want you to do is be one of the ushers. And I said, great, I'm glad to do it. We were driving, my wife and I were driving in our car to go to the wedding, and she reached down, pulled out of her pocket, pulled out this little vial of cocaine, and she goes, and I'm sitting there and I'm looking at that, and wow, you know, I really have it under control today. I'll bet I could take just a couple snorts of cocaine, it wouldn't bother me one bit. I said, Flo, can I have a little coke? She says, you're not supposed to because you're an alcoholic and a drug addict. And I said, you don't understand, I've got control of it now. So she gave me a couple snorts of it, and I turned over and I said, hey, look at that, I have control of it. Isn't that great? We have another one. So I just came on to it just a little bit, you know. So we got to the wedding there, and everybody's walking around selling. My buddy walked up and he says, you're at the party here, have a glass of champagne. I took a glass of champagne, and Flo said, but that's alcohol. I said, this is champagne. It's not alcohol. Alcohol is scotch, EO, bourbon, Cabernet Sauvignon. Not champagne. And I drank it, and I said, you see, I feel great. And I had a couple more, and I felt fantastic. And finished off that night, finished off the gram of Coke and about a half a bottle of champagne, and I felt fantastic. And I knew that I had alcoholism and drug addiction. And needless to say, I was fooling myself. I'm getting ahead of myself. Is there anybody here who's multi-addicted? Let's see, other than just alcohol, have you ever think of any drugs? Some of you raising your hand. Some of you are afraid to raise your hand. Some of you don't want your neighbors to know. I used to take speeds. I'm the one. Dr. Barber used to take speeds. That's the big book. I took every drug known to mankind with the exception of heroin, and I didn't do heroin because if I did that, I know I'd be a drug addict. God is my witness, I believe that. I believe that to the day I almost died. Just to tell you a little bit about myself, where I came from, I was born in Detroit, Michigan a lot of years ago, and I was born into an extremely Orthodox Jewish family. And the way of life was God, and my vocation was to, what I was going to be was a rabbi. And my life worked fine, everything was going along swell, I had no problems until I was about 4 years old. Up until that time, I was getting all the attention. I was my grandparents' first grandchild. I was the favorite. I was my father and mother's favorite. You know, I was the first one, and everything was wonderful. And then they had another son, my brother. And I really didn't object to Stuart being born. That was fine. I think I kind of resented them bringing him home from the hospital. And that's when my life changed, because what had happened at this time, he stole my thunder. It was now, Stuart was the favorite, and I was no longer getting all this attention. And I knew at the age of 4 that I needed attention. At this time, at the age of 4, I enrolled in a parochial school. The name of it was called the Yeshiva. For those of you who are not Jewish, just stay in yeshiva. For those of you that are Jewish, it's a school where you go to become a rabbi. And I went there every day. And one thing about the Jewish religion, for those who don't know, the Sabbath starts sundown Friday night and goes to sundown Saturday night. Now, what we would do at yeshiva on Saturdays, when we finished praying, all the men would get together in one room, and when they would all have a shot of booze. It was either Seventh Crown or Seagram's VO, and that's how they would celebrate the Sabbath. And it made no difference how old you were or how young you were. You would partake in this. They would give me little shots about this big, and I would sit there and I would just down that shot, and I remember that it burned, and I don't really think it did much to me externally, but one thing I do remember is that when I took that shot, they all came up to me, and they put their arm around me, and he said, "Look at Fred, he's a man. He drinks with the men." And that's the first time I was able to associate booze with being grown up. And then as years passed, now that only was a matter of being grown up, it was a matter of having fun. Like, we go to a party, and what better ways are having fun at a party than by drinking? So now it became a matter of having fun when you drink and getting attention when you drink. And that became the pattern through my whole life. Whenever I wanted to have fun, I would drink. Whenever I wanted attention, I would drink. And it made no difference if it was negative attention or positive attention, as long as I got attention, because I was love-starved. And I went through my whole childhood feeling alone, no friends, nobody really loved me. I'd be the center of attraction in school. I was the class clown. I got kicked out of school all the time. I would go to the bathroom and smoke cigarettes and get caught. My parents would have to come in, to see the teacher because I was a troublemaker. My mother was the only woman in the school that knew every teacher on a first-name basis. And I'm not saying it's funny, that was the absolute truth. I needed that attention, and I remember, as far back as I can remember, I was always hurting inside. I remember, I don't remember the age, but I remember my father used to always tell me that when I was born, I was an accident. I should have been born. The doctor told my parents that they could never have children. And 9 months and 2 weeks later, I was born. And they let me know that. And what had happened was, when I was born, something had happened. I was a product. I was an instrument baby. And they were coming out. They put this thing on my face, and they pulled it, and half my face was torn off. And all I got from my parents in the beginning, and mind you, they loved me. And I know they loved me. And they would tell me how you shouldn't have been born, but we loved you anyways. And when we brought you home from the hospital and the instrument tore your face off, you were so ugly that we didn't want to be seen with you. And I remembered that. And it was the most traumatic thing because I used to do everything to try to be cute, and I would need that attention. And they're wonderful people. My father, God rest his soul, this is a man that practiced the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous and never went to an AA meeting in his life. If you met my father, you fell in love with him. He was the most marvelous man in the world. And I love my mother. My mother's a 67-year-old drug addict in Detroit right now. I've got a brother in Florida with 6 years. I've got a brother in Detroit with a year and a half. And I've got a mother who takes 20 Valiums and 20 Satiquans every day. And like she said, these are because the doctor gave me these as a prescription. And I have a list of 8 or 9 doctors that she goes to regularly that don't know each other. So my mother is a legal drug addict. And this is the way I was born. There was really no alcoholism in my family. I don't recall my mother drinking, my father. I remember my grandfather. He used to drink a lot, and he died at the age of 89 and got married for the 5th time at the age of 85. So I really don't think there was much history about alcoholism in our family. It was when I finally got out of school, and I went into the Marine Corps, and The reason that I went to the Marine Corps is because the Marine Corps builds men. And that's all I ever wanted to be, was a man. So I joined the Marine Corps, and it didn't take long for me to become a full-fledged, full-blown alcoholic. I was stationed in the Philippines. I had a fantastic job. Myself and 4 other guys got picked to be the first communication technician, Secret Service Marines in the history of the Marine Corps. We went through Navy Security School, and I was stationed in the Philippines, and I was the commanding officer of the Marine Corps Security Group, Philippines. I was a PFC. And it was absolutely hysterical to walk around with a PFC chevron, and everybody walking around saying, wait a minute, because none of the Marine officers could tell me what to do. Like the Marines would say, you're not attached to the Marine Corps, you're attached to the Navy, so we want nothing to do with you. And the Navy Department said, you're a Marine, so we want nothing to do with you. And I was waiting for my top secret clearance to come in. And it hadn't come in yet, so the orders came in to let me do whatever I want to do until my top secret clearance came in. And this was exciting. Well, they have a beer in the Philippines called San Miguel, which is 17%. And I tried my first bottle, and it was instant love. It took me about 1 week to build up to a case a day. It was only 12 to a case. And when I got to the Philippines, I weighed 129 pounds. 6 months later, I was 189 pounds. And got typhoid fever. Okay. And I lost 50 pounds in less than 2 weeks and almost died. And the doctor told me that we feel that one of the reasons is because of your excessive drinking, made you weak, and you almost died. Now, I should have heeded the warning at that time that if you drink, you can die. So I took the warning, and I immediately changed to Scotch. And this is the way I went to Marine Corps, doing my Secret Service work, almost compromising the entire intelligence network of the Philippines, almost getting a honorable discharge. I managed to squeak through and get an honorable discharge, and got out of service and went back to Detroit and decided to get involved in business. I really had no vocation. There was no job for a PFC cryptographer in Detroit. So I had a brother-in-law. I just got married so before I got out of service. I had a brother-in-law who was an extremely successful insurance man. He said, Fred, why don't you try the insurance business? I can help you out. I said, fantastic. So the first thing I did was run around to all the bars that I knew where all my friends were. And I walked in and started drinking, and they said, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I'm going to try the insurance business. What do you think? Said, great business. So once I got everybody's approval that this was a great business, I became an insurance man, and I love this because I had an opportunity to go to all the bars and sell insurance. And it didn't take long before I was out of the insurance business. And I had to find something else. I had another brother-in-law who was an extremely successful real estate broker. He said, Fred, why don't you try the real estate business? That's what the real bucks are. And he said the magic word. So I proceeded to go back to the same bars, talk to my same friends, and I said, look, I got this opportunity to go into the real estate business. What do you think? They all said, Fred, real estate business is the best. Especially with your brother-in-law, you should be able to make $1 million in no time. So I went into the real estate business, and I used his name, and within the next year I became Maury's brother-in-law. I totally lost my identity. And the interesting thing is, because of my insecurities, I loved that. See, I've always wanted to be somebody. I always wanted to be something. And I became Maury's brother-in-law. And that's where it was. When I went to high school, it was the same thing. I had a cousin who went to the same high school I did. His name was Lloyd, and I was Lloyd's cousin. And I had another cousin who went to another high school, a sister high school. His name was Jerry, and I was Jerry's cousin. And that's the way I went to high school, Jerry and Lloyd's cousin. And now I'm in the real estate business, and I'm Maury's brother-in-law. And I used that to the hills. And I made a lot of money, and I lost a lot of money, and I drank a lot of money away because most of my deals were made in the bars. Whenever I got in trouble, or or screwed up on a deal, brother-in-law Morty was always there to bail me out. And he bailed me out time after time after time. Because all my deals that I made were always in bars, and they always got drugged. Because I knew that when I started making money, I was really unworthy. I didn't deserve it, because I'm really nothing. I'm nothing more than somebody's brother-in-law or somebody's cousin. And my parents really didn't want me, and I was an ugly child, and I really don't have any friends, and I'm hurting inside, and I would cry, and that's the way my life was. That's the way I lived. And I drank more, and I drank more, and I had a son, and I knew that I could never be the father because I'm not that type of a person. My father was a marvelous man, and he did the best he could raising me, and I failed him. And I couldn't be the kind of a father to my son that my father was to me, so I know that I failed him. And my wife, I was no good to her because she came from a wealthy family and I couldn't compete. I thought I couldn't compete. See, all I had to do was just do the footwork and I could be successful on my own. I know that today, but I didn't know that then. So what had happened was I literally ruined that relationship. And I knew that the only thing that would help me would be to leave Detroit and come out to California. Because California is really where the action is. This is when they had 77 Sunset Strip on television, Surfside 6, and the Beach Boys singing about the West Coast girls. And I see the movies, Beach Party Bingo, they're all there, and the girls with the keys, and the band's playing on the beach, and that's where I belong. I knew I would fit in there, because that's who I really am. And I hopped in my car, I said goodbye to my wife, goodbye to my son. I hopped in my car, came out to California. Before I came out to California, one of the businesses that I got into also is I had an opportunity to buy a nightclub in Detroit. I wheeled and dealed, and I bought this great nightclub, and it's wonderful, especially when you're an alcoholic, owning your own nightclub, and you want attention, you can be the MC of your own club. It's marvelous. I venture to say I'm probably the only kid in the United States that was ever canceled from his own nightclub by his mother. Her attitude was, what are you doing? This is your club. You're Jewish. You hire people to do these things. Jews are chosen people, and I lived with this stigma. Of course, I didn't realize I was chosen to be a failure. So I came out to California. Now, when I was on my way to San Diego, because when I owned the nightclub, I had a dozen hookers that were working for me. And a couple of the girls moved to California. They said, when you get to California, come on up to San Diego. We'll take care of you. They were going to give you a job. Just to interject something. Two things I said I would never be in my entire life. Okay. I would never be a drug dealer or a pimp. Okay, and that was both. So I'm on my way to San Diego. I stopped by to see a cousin here. And I stayed at my cousin's house for a couple days. He said, where are you going, Fred? I said, well, I'm going down to San Diego. I know a couple people there, and I'm going to stay with them. He said, why don't you stay with me for a couple weeks? And if you want to go to San Diego, you can go down there. I said, great. We're sitting around there, and I'm having a couple of drinks, relaxing. Also, we pulled up one of these funny cigarettes. I looked at that, and he lit it, he took a puff, and I said, what's that? He says, it's marijuana. See, I always thought, I saw a product, of reefer madness. You smoke one joint, you inject it in your vein, you're hooked for life. And he said, take a puff, and I said, no, I can't. He said, it's okay. I said, I'll tell you what, as soon as my dad starts smoking grass, I'll smoke grass. He said, you got it. He got on the phone, got my dad on the phone, handed me the phone. I said, hi, Dad. He said, where are you? I said, I'm in California. I'm on my way to San Diego. He says, oh, okay. I said, Dad, the reason that I called is Eddie's sitting here and he's smoking a marijuana cigarette, and I told him the day you start smoking, I'll start smoking. What do you think? He says, son, do whatever you want. His mom and I are so loaded right now, we don't care what you do. Son of a gun. There it is, license. I've been given license by somebody that I love and respect, my father. I said, okay, Pops. I took that joint and I proceeded. Now, I'll tell you something. The first time that I smoked that joint, it was absolute heaven. The combination of grass and booze made me 6 feet tall. that's what I've always wanted to be. And I had courage. And I made it. Boy, that was the most marvelous feeling in the world. And after I was there a couple of weeks, I decided to stay there because they had good dough. You know, my cousin's supplying me with grass, and he's supplying me with booze. And I met somebody there who had a great business selling pots and pans door to door. He said, Fred, you want to make a lot of money, sell pots and pans and make a fortune. Well, I'm an entrepreneur. I don't know nothing about selling pots and pans, but if I can make myself a few bucks to tide me over until I can make it really big in Hollywood, you know, I'll just do this. So I started selling pots and pans, and I'd stay up at bars, drinking until 2 o'clock in the morning, partying. And this is it. This is exactly how I envisioned California. The parties, the girls, the booze, and I never even knew about this. And life was working for me. And all of a sudden, like 3 o'clock, you know, it gets to 3 in the morning, and I get up at 7 or 8, I can't function. My cousin walked up and says, take one of these little orange, you know, pills. I said, hey, he was right with the grass. There's got to be right with the pills. I popped this pill, and I went out there, and I made a fortune that first day just like that. And I'm raring to go. Well, I just made this fantastic. I looked, all right, let's go on with this one. On and on and on and on and on. I figured, this is it. This is great. What are these pills? He says, it doesn't matter. Take it. It's okay. So by this time here, I moved into a singles club called the South Bay Club in Van Nuys, California. I moved there, and the first day I met this guy who was a doctor. I said, his name was Les. I said, Les, I got to tell you something. I got this pill. It's the greatest thing. He said, don't worry about it. How many do you want? I said, 1 million. He gave me a prescription for Dexedrine. I went out, and I filled it there, and I looked at it, and I looked at this bottle. It says, 30, take as needed. And I'm staring at this, and I'm very grateful that he gave me this prescription for 30 Dexies. Only 30 Dexies as needed. Now, I know me. As needed is, when I get up in the morning, now this should last me about 4 hours, about noon. So I figured that 30 of these got to be good for about a week. And I was wrong. It only lasted me 3 days. I went back to Les. I said, Les, I got to talk. He said, no problem. And he handed me a bottle of 1,000. Now I'm set. I know I'm not going to run through this in a week or two. And it's wonderful. Now I have booze that I can drink without nobody hassling me. I've got grass, abundance of grass, because now I found every good grass dealer in Van Nuys. And all the Dexedrine that I could ever want. Life is fantastic, and now I'm making a fortune. I'm getting no sleep. I'm getting run down. But I'm partying and I feel fantastic. And I had arrived. This is what I was looking for my whole life. About 3, 4 months later, a friend of mine came up to me and said, by the doctor, he said, you want to try something? I said, sure. He says, try it. It had to be a little third capsule. I looked at that and I said, what is it, buddy? And he said, it's called LSD. Now, this guy's my friend, he's my doctor, he's my best friend in the whole world. I mean, maybe give me 1,000 Dexies, you know he's not an enemy, didn't even charge me. I took the cousin. What he explained to me, he was the head of the drug rehabilitation program at UCLA, and LSD, for those of you who didn't know, was used for patients who are suffering from schizophrenia. Schizophrenia, isn't that great? I'm going to schizophrenia. I saw a t-shirt now, I just got this stuff, it was absolutely hysterical. It says, roses are red, violets are blue, I'm schizophrenic, and so am I. I love that. So I took this LSD, and this became my drug of choice. And the combination of LSD and alcohol was the magic elixir. And I lived on that for the longest time. And during this period of time, I knew that what I really had to do now was get out of Van Nuys, California. Because I don't want to be a valley guy, you know? I want to live, if I can live in California, money, I got a couple bucks in my pocket, I got plenty of dope, I got friends, all the booze at my disposal. Where I should be living now is Marina del Rey on the water. And I moved there. And it was fantastic. I moved into the Swinging Singles Club in Marina del Rey with my booze, my drugs, my pots and pans. And it didn't take very long before I knew everybody there. I was like the leader of the pack, so I thought. The best way to become like the center of attraction is to share your dope and your booze with people. My door was always open. As soon as you walked into the door, I had that drink right in your face. And everybody loved that. And if you were a doper, I stuck a joint in your mouth, and if you wanted LSD, I just threw that tablet at you. My apartment was like smorgasbord. It was fantastic. And I mean, everybody had it. I had a pill, a drug, or a drink for any mood or any place that you wanted to be. And I was very, very popular. And inside, I was still dying. Because I knew that, you see, if you knew who I really was, insecure, I was scared, and I'm not a professional, and I really want to tell you that I love you, and I know that you're going to laugh at me if I tell you that I love you. Or if I wanted to hug you, you'd look at me and think I was probably from like West Hollywood or something, this type of thing. So I covered up by drinking and using drugs. And this is the way it went for a few months. And what happened, I was sitting by the pool one day, really blitzed, and I saw this cute little girl sitting over there, looking at her. I walked up to her, and I looked her right in the eye. And I knew as soon as I looked her in the eye, I wanted what she had. And I married her and got it. I ripped her off for every penny that she had. She was a teacher, had a retirement fund, I got that. And ironically, she stuck by me all the years. The interesting thing is, while I was doing this, I got involved in a lot of different drugs. I was always drinking. No matter what drug I did, no matter what happened, my base was my bar. I started from there. I drank when I would have dope or whatever it was. I always had to make sure that I was near the booze. One day, I had a friend of mine, what happened was, I saw pots and pans for so long that I got tired and I got burnt out, and Flo said to me, he said, you know, Fred, why don't you just stop working for a while, and, you know, I can afford it, we'll find something else for you to do. You know, sure. That's simple, sure. So, what happened was, I was sitting around with a friend of mine one day, he says, Fred, do you know anybody who has any PCP? This is the time when PCP was not what it is today. This was totally harmless PCP. They had those strychnine in it. All it did was just eat your brain cells, but it wouldn't kill you. And I said, sure. Yeah, I know. I probably get all you want. How many do you want? He says, somebody wants 50,000 tablets. That's no problem. So I called up my supplier. I said, I need 50,000 tablets of PCP. Can you help me out? He said, sure. I talked to another friend of mine. He said, I've got somebody who wants to buy it, so you bring the money, the $100,000, and we're going to meet at Jamaica Bay Inn in Marina del Rey. We're going to give him this, and you're going to make yourself $5,000 and get 1,000 free tablets. You know, the money didn't mean anything, but 1,000 free tablets later. That impressed the hell out of me. So we met at Jamaica Bay Inn. This friend of mine had his friend there, and I had my friend, and I reached in, I took out, we went to the cars, I opened up the trunk, I picked out the 50,000 tablets of PCP, and I handed it to my friend's friend. I said, here's your money, and he pulled out a gun, stuck it to my head, and he said, busted. And I just stood there, and I said one word that starts with F, and we'll let it go at that. And I got petrified, and there I am sitting in jail, and I'm scared. One more time. And what's going through my mind at this time is that I'm going to go to jail, I'm going to be raped, all these fears. I really prayed, and now I'm lying, but I'm praying to God. judge know that I'm really not like this. This really isn't me. You know, I'm really a nice guy. You know, I don't want to hurt anybody. And I prayed and I prayed. And my wife got this, the top drug attorney in the country at that time. And he said, the first thing we've got to do is you've got to get a job. It's hard to explain to a judge that, you know, the only reason you sold 50,000 tablets of PCP, you know, to a federal narcotics officer is because you were trying to do a friend a favor and you're not working because your wife's supporting you. You know, it doesn't work. So I said, okay, what I'm going to do is this. What do I want to do? I always wanted to be a hairstylist. The first thing I did is I went and I enrolled in beauty school. See, I wanted to be famous. What better ways are to be famous in Hollywood than to become a very famous hairdresser and start doing movie stars and studio work and what have you. And this is what I did. I went to beauty school. And I was about 6, 7 months through beauty school, and came time to go to court, and we stood before the judge. And the judge looked at me and he said, what we are doing, we see that you're trying to do something with your life, you go to beauty school, and if we give you a felony conviction with 20 years, you will not be able to practice, get any license at all, and you won't be able to be a hairstylist. Now, we see you are trying, and I know you're a decent guy, you've never been in trouble with the law before. What we are doing is we are lowering this to a misdemeanor, giving you 1 year probation, and a $250 fine. And the reason for this, he explained to me, is we know you're not a dealer because when this man who you didn't know said, is your real name Dar, you proceeded to pull out your credit cards, your driver's license, and every bit of identification that you had on you. And that's what I did. You know. Now, I learned something by this. I learned a very, very important message at this time. Don't ever, ever deal PCP. I switched immediately to cocaine. Now, what happened during this period of time after school, I went to a couple shops, a couple very famous shops, and I studied, and I assisted, I learned to craft well, and I opened up a little shop in Hollywood and started doing a little business there, and started doing a couple celebrities. And what had happened, the problem was, I knew I was good, but it was a very small shop, and only I was working there. Nobody knew who I was. So what I needed was a bigger shop. And a better place to go would be Marina Del Rey, where I could have a nice shop and a few people working for me, do a few more movie stars, and put up a big sign and people would know who I am. So I did the same thing that I did throughout my whole life. I walked up and said, give me. And my wife gave me the money. They opened the shop, had 3 people working for me, and it was fantastic. And I'm doing a couple celebrities now, and I'm doing cocaine, and I'm drinking like a fish, and my life is wonderful. See, the problem was, though, the sign that was in front of my shop was only like about 2 feet by 2 feet, and you really couldn't see who I was because the sign was much too small. What I needed basically was a bigger shop with a bigger sign and even bigger celebrities. So I sold this shop. I didn't actually sell the shop. I forgot to make a few payments to get me out. And my money was going for drugs and booze at that time, and I was making a lot of money, but not enough to keep everything going. So I opened up a bigger shop. Now, this shop that I opened now was located in the front of this apartment where I live. Now, this was fantastic. They said I had probably money for my wife again. Probably gathered that. And I had 7 people working for me. I'm making a ton of money. I've got a 5-foot sign in front of my building. I'm right next door to Benihana's restaurant, and my apartment's here. You got it? A triangle, apartment, shop, Benihana's. I'll get back to that in a second. Now, I'm doing a lot of cocaine, a lot of booze, a lot of drinking, and a lot of everything. You name it, I did it. Now, what happened here is, this is starting to get towards the end of my drinking and using. My day started out like this. I'd wake up in the morning with an 1/8 of an ounce of Freebase cocaine sitting on my nightstand. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with Freebase and cocaine, this is what Richard Pryor burned up with. couple of years ago, that I had been a black comedian, I would have burnt out 10 years ago. I would start out with this on my nightstand, 1/8 of an ounce. Next to that, my bed, I had a 5-foot tank of nitrous oxide. Nitrous oxide is laughing gas. And next to that, I had a few incidental drugs, one called ketamine hydrochloride, which is green, which if you snort that, it just gives you about a 20-minute acid high. That's kind of like this little kicker. And amyl nitrates, I had everything going. I couldn't survive unless I was someplace else mentally. So I wake up in the morning, suck on the Freebase pipe, go to the shop, pray that I wouldn't have any appointments, go next door to Benihana, they opened up at 11 o'clock, run in there, down a double martini, shoot up to my apartment, suck on a Freebase pipe, go back down to the shop, and eventually, every once in a while I'd have appointments, but I kept losing my customers. And the reason I would lose my customers would be this. I'll just give you the last few customers that I can remember. I'd walk and I was giving a lady a perm, and I was doing a hair coloring and giving a haircut. And I'm right in the middle of this lady sitting here, this lady sitting here, and I'm cutting the head of hair, and the phone would ring. And as soon as the phone rang, I'd go, "Oh my God, I'll be right there." I explained, it made no difference who was on the other end of the phone. That would be my statement. I'd hang up the phone, shoot right out of the shop, go next door to Benihana's, down a couple of good martinis, shoot up to my apartment, suck on the Freebase pipe, go back down into the bathroom of the shop, take a couple snorts, come back and start blow drying his head of hair. And the customer would say, "Aren't you going to finish cutting it?" And I'd say, "Shut your damn mouth. I'm the hairstylist. I'm trying to be creative." And this lady's screaming that the perm is burning her hair, and this lady's hair is turning green over here. And I'm wondering why I'm losing all my customers. I mean, I'm a very creative person. These people don't understand me. And that's the problem with everybody. Nobody in my whole life ever understood me. So one day I was sitting in my apartment, stuck on the Freebase pipe, went down to the shop, ran into the bathroom, took out, snorted a couple of tubes of cocaine, and I noticed that somebody had taken the roll of toilet paper. See, I always had toilet paper in the shop coming from the back. Because I knew that's the way toilet paper and somebody put it on hand of toilet paper coming from the front. I came running out of the shop, and I go back into the shop, there were like 20 people there, and I yelled out at the top of my lungs, "Who put the goddamn toilet paper on backwards?" It was instant silence. Nobody said a word. And this one girl, Barbara, she turned around and she said, "I did that, and it really doesn't matter." And I said to her, "Barbara, you are a stupid idiot." It does matter. See, let me tell you something. It did matter to me. This, at that time, was the most important issue in my life. That somebody had undermined my authority and put toilet paper the wrong way. I got on the phone right there with all the people there. I got on the phone and I dialed, the first was Howard Johnson's. "Is this Howard Johnson's? Which way does toilet paper go on the roll?" And they were hanging up on me. And I said, "Toilet paper goes from the inside, thank you." And I went, and I got called up Santa Monica Hospital. I called up the Holiday Inns. I called up 8-9 places. And no matter what they said, "That's right, it comes from the inside." People are walking out of the shop. They think I'm bananas, which I was. Very, very important thing in my life, which way toilet paper. I would call her up at 11 o'clock at night. I would call her up on her days off. One day they all walked up to me and they said, "Fred, you're fired," and they all left. Here I am sitting with a very successful shop, and I'm doing movie stars, and I had a couple of TV shows on, and I was a legend in my own mind. This is the way I believe, as God is my witness, I believe that was the greatest thing ever put on this earth. And if I didn't have booze in me or drugs in me, I'm absolutely nothing. Because I needed the booze and I needed the drugs to convince me that I was somebody. I went to the doctor, And the doctor looked at me and said, we have a problem here. I kept going through it for a while. I had arthritis. I was starting to get paralyzed. And he gave me pills for this. They were not mind altering pills. They were okay to help me. He said, you know, but there's something wrong with you here. I want to take blood samples. We took blood samples and found that I had high triglycerides, and they were ready to kill me. And he couldn't understand what caused this. And I never told him that I was an alcoholic or drug addict because I didn't know. And he said to me, Freddie, we have a problem here. He says, whatever it is that you're doing, he says, you're going to be dead in 2 weeks. He says, your blood pressure right now is 129/109 rested. And everybody in my family's had a heart attack by the time they reach 40. And everybody except up to that time, everybody up to that time had died from heart trouble, including my father. And I didn't care, because as I was stuck in that Freebase pipe and drink, I would get mini heart attacks. I understand having between 20 and 40 little mini heart attacks. I didn't care. So I wanted to die. Life wasn't worth living anyways. I finally told him that I was an alcoholic, a drug addict. I've been doing a lot of drinking and drugging, but there's something about it. Because I promised you in 2 weeks you'll be dead. And I didn't care. I went home one day, and I walked to the house. And as I walked in, I noticed my wife was on the bed and she was crying. And I had never seen my wife cry. She's always been like the strength for me. As long as she was strong and held things together, I could survive. And I said, what's the matter? And she said that she hated herself so much for allowing herself to live that kind of a lifestyle. And I looked, and all of a sudden I got choked up, and I realized for the first time that I had really hurt somebody other than myself. And it was like a spiritual awakening, and I knew that I had to do something about that. And what I did at that time is I hopped on a plane one more time, went out to Florida, went through detox, came back up to LA, immediately got a sponsor. I went to over 400 meetings the first year and had 6 commitments a week. Doesn't do much for marriage, but it does wonders for sobriety. And my wife understood. She stood by me. And I have a great relationship with her today. And I believed everything that you people told me. My first year was an absolute honeymoon. There was nothing in the world that could touch me. I didn't care if I lost this shop or if they kept the shop. It made no difference to me whatsoever. Because I believed that somebody up there was watching over me. My second year, well, I was a little past my second year, about a year and a half ago, year and a couple months, whatever it is. I went away for the weekend ski with a friend of mine. I got back, and all of a sudden I had chest pains. I went to the doctor, and he said, Fred, he said, I want you to go to the hospital. We want to do some tests. They put me in the hospital. They gave me treadmills. They gave me angiograms. They said, Fred, this is on Thursday. We have to operate Monday, or else you're going to die. So what's the matter? So we have to do a 5-way bypass surgery on you immediately. And I was scared of the hospital. And, the night before the surgery, my sponsor and about half a dozen friends came in and they held a meeting right there. The hospital bed was beautiful. I thought they were kidding when they came in. They pulled out the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and they said, we're going to have a meeting. And I said, hey, this is terrific. I'm going to die tomorrow. I'm having a meeting today. You know? I'm going to go on spiritually. You know? And we had a meeting there, and after the meeting was over, I felt fabulous. I knew that nothing could touch me. And what had happened is they left. I went to the bathroom, I sneezed, threw my back out, and wound up with a pink sciatica that became crippled on my right leg. Most excruciating pain I've ever had. There I am going for open heart surgery the next day with a pink sciatica, totally in pain. And as they're wheeling me into the operating room, the most phenomenal thing in my life happened is they're wheeling me in. They left me like in the middle of the rooms in the hallway, and I heard my father come to me and say, Fred. And I looked around, and this voice was as real to me as me standing here before you. And he said, Fred, it's Pops. Pops, what are you doing here? And they hadn't given me anything, because you don't understand. And the doctor says, you don't understand, Freddie, we're supposed to tell you that. I know, I just want you guys to feel comfortable that I know we have nothing to worry about. Let's get on with it. I came through that surgery absolutely fine. My leg was damaged for a while. I couldn't walk. And I realize now the reason that I had the pinch sciatica because after the surgery, you're supposed to take it easy, and not overdo things. And because of my alcoholic personality, I'd be out trying to run a 10K 2 days after my surgery and kill myself. So it's funny how the pinch sciatica being crippled, lasted for like about 3 months. This is about the length of time that the doctor wanted me to take it easy. Then the pain went away, and then I got pneumonia. Then I had also had a health problem my second year. And I'll tell you something, during that second year, what had happened was I wound up selling the business. I found out I hated hair. I hated the business. And I decided this time I met a friend of mine who was in Alcoholics Anonymous for a few years, and he was in the computer software business. He said, Fred, why don't you come and work for me? He said, you might like this business. I said, okay, and I started working for him. And I've been there about 10 months now. I had about 4 months in there where I didn't do anything, and I was in headhunting business for a couple of months trying to find something I didn't like it. Anyways, I started working for this guy, Jerry. And the first 2 or 3 months I was doing lousy. And I prayed every night. I got on my knees and said, please, God, if this is your will for me, let it be. If not, give me direction. And every day, it got better and better. My first 2-week paycheck was $4.50. And I knew I was a loser, And what had happened was today, I'm one of the top producers in the company. I make more money legally than I've ever made my entire life. I'm a sales manager and have a couple people working for me. My boss tells me that he respects me. He tells me that I'm a producer and a good example today. And I'll tell you something. Coming from where I've been, the type of person that I am, a very insecure, scared person who knows he doesn't deserve anything. Being where I am today is an absolute miracle. See, because the big book tells me that I can have anything in the world that I want. In abundance. Abundance. The magic word today. Because the harder I work today, the luckier I get. The more footwork that I do, the more money I make. The more institutional work that I do, and I do a lot of institutional work. I go to prisons. I go to rehab centers. I go anywhere at all that I'm invited to go and share. Any 12-step call that I can make day or night, I'll do it today. Because what you people have given to me is a whole new life. I'm not the same person that I was when I came into this program a few years ago. I can look in the mirror today and look at myself and say, hey, Fred, I love you. I can look at everybody in this room and say to each and every one of you, I love you all. And you want to know something? I don't care what you think of me. You see, I love you today, and that's none of your business. And that's what Alcoholics Anonymous is giving you today. So for my life, and my happiness, and my joy, I thank God, and I thank each and every one of you in this room for giving me my life. Jim, thank you.